My wife's friend accused me of getting her pregnant. My wife left me without asking a single question. Then I discovered the truth, and nothing was ever the same again. Marcus Webb was 34 years old. He was not a loud man. He was not the kind of man who demanded attention in a room or announced himself when he walked through a door. He was the kind of man who showed up early, stayed late, and let his work speak for everything. He had spent 10 years building a life in Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind of life that does not happen by accident. It happens by discipline, by sacrifice, by choosing over and over again to do the quiet and unglamorous thing when the easier path was always available. Before we move on, tell me in the comments which state you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe. Tomorrow's episode may touch a story that is still unfolding. He worked as a senior IT infrastructure engineer at a mid-sized cybersecurity firm in uptown Charlotte. He earned $91,000 a year. He knew every system he touched better than the people who designed them. His colleagues respected him. His supervisors trusted him with their most sensitive projects. He had never once given anyone a reason to question his integrity. His wife, Simone Webb, was 32. She managed brand partnerships at a well-regarded marketing firm headquartered in the South End district. She was sharp, socially gifted, and beautiful in the particular way of someone who had always known how to present herself to the world. They had met at North Carolina A&T, where Marcus was finishing his computer science degree and Simone was midway through her communications program. They had dated for 3 years before marrying. They had been married for 8. Their home was a 3-bedroom Craftsman in the Cotswold neighborhood of Charlotte. They had purchased it 14 months earlier for $650,000, stretching their combined income to its limit, but making it work because they believed in where they were going together. They had talked about children. They had talked about the future. They had made plans the way people make plans when they still believe the person beside them is who they appear to be. Simone's closest friend, Janelle Croft, was 29. She had grown up with Simone. She had been in their wedding. She had sat at their dinner table more times than Marcus could count, eating food he cooked, laughing at his jokes, calling him family. She was charming and restless and chronically unstable in the way of someone who always needed a stage and an audience. Marcus had always sensed something performative beneath her warmth. He had never said so. He had bitten his tongue because she was Simone's person, and Simone's loyalty to her was absolute and entirely non-negotiable. He should have trusted that instinct. He did not yet know that the dinner invitation sitting on the kitchen counter that Tuesday evening in November was not a celebration. It was a detonation. It had been planned. It had been rehearsed, and Marcus Webb, standing in his bathroom nodding his tie in the mirror, had no idea that by the time he returned to that house, his entire world would already be ash. The restaurant was called Lumiere, a private dining establishment in the Myers Park neighborhood of Charlotte. It was the kind of place where the lighting was always soft, and the silence between courses felt intentional. White roses on the table, gold candle holders catching the reflection of wine glasses, the low, warm murmur of classical music underneath every conversation. 23 members of Simone's family had gathered to celebrate her parents, Ernest and Gloria Croft, renewing their vows after 35 years of marriage. Marcus had worn his charcoal suit. He had been looking forward to the evening. Work had been grinding him down for weeks. He needed this. A few hours of warmth and belonging, the kind that only comes from sitting inside the life you built and recognizing that it is real. Janelle arrived late. She always arrived late. She stepped into the private dining room wearing a black dress that was 1 degree too dramatic for the occasion, her natural hair pinned high, her eyes red-rimmed, a folded tissue pressed against her palm like a stage prop. She paused at the entrance just long enough for every face to turn toward her. Marcus noticed immediately. He noticed the calculation in that pause. He noticed the tissue. He noticed the way her chin trembled before she had even spoken a single word. "I am so sorry I am late," she said to the table, her voice carefully fragile. "I have been dealing with something very difficult, something I was not sure I should bring here tonight." Simone was on her feet before anyone else moved. She crossed the room toward her friend, her napkin falling unnoticed from her lap. "Janelle, what is wrong? What happened?" Janelle drew a slow breath. She let the room go completely quiet. Every piece of silverware had gone still. The servers retreated to the corners without being asked. "I am pregnant," Janelle whispered, loud enough for every person at that table to hear. She let the silence hold for exactly 1 moment. Then she lifted her eyes and looked directly at Marcus. She held his gaze just long enough to make certain everyone noticed the direction of that look. "The father is Marcus." The room did not erupt immediately. It inhaled first, a single collective breath of disbelief. Then everything collapsed at once. Simone's face went white, then flooded with a color that looked like rage and grief simultaneously. Her wine glass hit the floor. Red wine spread across the white tablecloth like a wound opening. "That is not true," Marcus said. His voice came out quieter than he intended. His hands gripped the table edge. "You know exactly what you did," Janelle said, her voice rising with the practiced precision of a woman who had rehearsed this moment. Her shoulders shook. Her tears came on cue. Ernest Croft stood from his chair. His voice was low and controlled, and more dangerous than shouting. "Get out of this restaurant, right now, before I do something I will deeply regret." Marcus looked around the table. He searched 23 faces for 1 moment of hesitation, 1 flicker of doubt. He found nothing. Not 1 person paused. Not 1 person asked to hear his side. Every face had already decided. He walked out into the cold Charlotte night alone. He sat in his car in the parking lot of Lumiere for 19 minutes. He did not move. He could not move. His hands rested on the steering wheel and trembled so finely that he could barely feel it, the way a structure trembles before it falls. He could still hear the restaurant through the glass, muffled voices, Simone crying, his name spoken the way people speak the names of things they are ashamed to have ever trusted. He drove home on autopilot. He did not remember traffic lights or turns. He simply arrived. The locks had already been changed. There was a note taped to the front door in Simone's handwriting, her careful looping script that he had always found beautiful. "Your belongings will be placed in a storage unit. The address will be sent to you by text. Do not contact me. Do not come to my workplace. Do not attempt to see me. My attorney will be in contact." He tried his key anyway. He watched it fail. He stood on his own front step in his charcoal suit and understood for the first time what it felt like to be completely erased. His phone had been vibrating continuously since the parking lot. He did not look at it until he was back inside his car. The messages were merciless. "Simone's cousin, I always knew something was off about you. You disgust me." Simone's brother, "Stay away from this family. I mean every word of that." A childhood friend of Simone's who had danced at their wedding. "How could you do this to her? She gave you everything." Not 1 person had asked him a single question. He spent that first night in a budget motel off Interstate 85 near the University City area of Charlotte. The sheets smelled of industrial bleach. The ceiling had water stains shaped like continents. He lay on top of the covers in his dress shirt and stared upward and tried to find the edges of what had just happened to him. The following morning, he arrived at his office before 7 in the morning, hollow-eyed and still wearing the same clothes. His direct supervisor, Gerald Osai, called him in before he reached his desk. Gerald was a decent man, a fair man, but the look on his face that morning was the look of a man managing a situation, not speaking to a colleague. The company had received calls, several of them, from Simone's family. "I was not even in Charlotte when she claims this occurred," Marcus said. "I was in Raleigh. You sent me there yourself. You authorized the travel." Gerald paused, then nodded slowly. "I hear you, but until this is resolved, I need you to take paid leave. 2 weeks. Get ahead of this." It was not a request. Marcus walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box containing a coffee mug, a framed photograph from his honeymoon, and 3 technical certification manuals. The security guard he had greeted every morning for 4 years looked at the floor as he passed. He checked into an extended stay hotel that afternoon and sat down at his laptop. 2 weeks. He had 2 weeks to rebuild everything from nothing. He had no idea yet that the evidence he needed had been sitting in his own accounts the entire time, waiting for him to look. Sleep did not come that first night in the extended stay hotel. It did not come the second night either. Marcus lay in the dark with his laptop open on the small desk across the room and let his mind move through the timeline the way he moved through a compromised network, methodically, without panic, looking for the point of failure. Janelle had claimed the conception occurred in September. She had been specific. She had named a window of time when Simone was traveling for a work conference. She had described an evening at the house. She had described drinks. She had described details with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed them until they felt real. But September was the month Marcus had been in Raleigh. He sat up. He opened his email and searched with shaking hands. The confirmation was there, exactly where he had left it, untouched and time-stamped and absolute. He had been dispatched to a critical infrastructure audit at a financial services company in downtown Raleigh. He had flown out of Charlotte Douglas International Airport on the morning of September 13th. He had not returned until the evening of September 16th. His company had booked his hotel. His hotel keycard had recorded every entry and exit. He had eaten meals at restaurants within walking distance of his client's building and paid with his corporate card, creating a trail of receipts with his name, the merchant name, the date, and the exact time of every transaction. He had been photographed by his client's internal security system every single day of that audit. He had shaken hands with 7 people who could place him in Raleigh during every hour of every day that Janelle had described. It was not possible. Not physically, not logistically, not in any version of reality. The relief that moved through him was so intense it made his vision blur. He sat at the edge of the hotel bed and pressed his hands over his face and breathed slowly. Then he opened a new folder on his desktop and began to organize. Flight confirmation, hotel booking, corporate card receipts, geotagged photographs from his phone showing the interior of his client's server room, the names and contact information of every colleague present during the audit. 53 individual pieces of documentation. Any one of them would raise serious questions about Janelle's account. Together, they were not evidence of innocence. They were a wall. He tried calling Simone. Voicemail. Again, voicemail. He sent a text message explaining the Raleigh trip, the dates, the documentation. The message showed as delivered. It was never read. He tried her parents. The line rang once before going to voicemail. They had blocked his number. He tried every social platform they shared, blocked on every one. He had been quarantined as completely and efficiently as a virus. The family had moved in unison, which meant they had coordinated, which meant someone had pulled them to. Marcus closed his laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. He was not destroyed. He had evidence. But evidence only matters when someone is willing to look at it. And right now, no one in his world was willing to look at anything except the performance Janelle had delivered at that dinner table. That had to change. He was going to change it. But first he needed to understand why it had happened at all. Because an innocent man does not get framed by accident. Someone needed him gone badly enough to build an entire lie around his life. And somewhere in that need was a name he had not found yet. The phone plan had been Simone's idea originally. A family account, she had said. It saves money if we combine lines. They had added her parents. Later, they had added Janelle, 2 years earlier, when Janelle was between jobs and could not cover her own bill. The account was in Marcus's name, tied to his email address. Simone had never asked him to transfer it, and in the chaos of the past 72 hours, she had almost certainly not thought about it at all. Marcus opened the account portal from his hotel room and navigated to Janelle's line. Call logs, text message metadata, timestamps, duration. The content of the messages was not stored on the carrier's servers, but everything surrounding the messages was archived with absolute precision. What he found stopped his breathing. Between the first week of July and the last week of September, there was a phone number that appeared in Janelle's call log with the frequency and rhythm of a relationship, not a professional contact. Multiple calls per day, conversations lasting 40, 50, 60 minutes, late-night calls placed after 11 in the evening, early morning calls placed before 7 in the morning. The cadence of intimacy, the pattern of two people who could not stop reaching for each other. Marcus ran the number through a reverse lookup service. The result loaded slowly. He gripped the edge of the desk. The number belonged to Dominic Hargrove. He knew that name. Dominic Hargrove was 51 years old, the senior creative director at Prestige South, the Durham-based marketing firm where Simone had worked for 4 years. He was Simone's direct supervisor. Marcus had met him twice, once at a company event in the fall where Dominic had complimented his handshake, once at a dinner where Dominic had brought a bottle of expensive wine and talked warmly and at length about his wife and his 3 adult children. He was the kind of man who performed respectability so smoothly that no one ever thought to look underneath it. He was also the man Janelle had been calling every day for 3 months. Marcus leaned back in his chair and let the architecture of it assemble itself in his mind. Janelle had been doing freelance design work for Prestige South since June. Simone had arranged it. Simone had mentioned it casually one evening over dinner, said she was helping Janelle get back on her feet. Janelle and Dominic would have been in the same building, on the same projects, in the same orbit. Janelle with her hunger for powerful men, Dominic with his corner office and his authority, and the particular confidence of a man who had never once been told no. And now Janelle was pregnant, and she was terrified of what revealing the real father would cost. Because Dominic Hargrove was not just a married man, he was Simone's boss. He was the man who controlled Simone's career. He was a man with significant professional reputation and a wife who had stood beside him at industry events for over 2 decades. Protecting Dominic meant destroying someone else, and Marcus had been the most convenient available target. The motive was now visible, clear and cold and deliberate. This was not impulsive. This was engineered. Marcus pulled up Simone's call logs next. His hands were no longer shaking. Something had settled inside him. Not calm exactly, more like the particular stillness that comes when grief finishes burning and what is left beneath it is something harder. What he found in Simone's records was worse than anything Janelle had done, because Janelle had always been exactly who she was. There had never been any illusions about Janelle Croft. But Simone had been his wife. Simone had been the person he trusted with every interior room of his life. Beginning on the 18th of September, the day Simone returned from her supposed work conference in Myrtle Beach, there were 3 to 4 short calls per day between her number and Janelle's. Brief calls, 2 minutes, 4 minutes, 6 minutes. The duration of coordination, the duration of people keeping their stories synchronized. They continued every single day leading up to the family dinner. Then, on the 10th of November, 2 evenings before the dinner, there was a 1-hour call between Simone and Janelle placed at 9:45 in the evening. 14 minutes after that call ended, Janelle called Dominic. That call lasted 40 minutes. Then, at 11:20 in the evening, Simone called Janelle again, 32 minutes. They were not just talking, they were rehearsing. Marcus opened his laptop and navigated to the home security system he had installed himself 18 months earlier after a series of package thefts in the Cotswold neighborhood. 3 cameras, front door, back door, garage, all connected to encrypted cloud storage under his personal email account. Simone had never managed the system. She had never needed to. He scrolled back through the archived footage. November 9th, late evening. A black luxury SUV pulled into the driveway at 10:43 at night. Janelle stepped out from the driver's side. A man emerged from the passenger side, tall, well-dressed even at that hour, moving with the unhurried ease of someone accustomed to deference. He looked up and down the street before following Janelle to the front door, the specific caution of someone who understood the consequences of being seen. Simone answered the door immediately, as if she had been standing behind it, waiting. All 3 went inside. Marcus fast-forwarded through the footage. 11 in the evening, midnight. 1 in the morning. The man emerged at 1:17 in the morning. Simone walked him to his vehicle. They stood close, speaking quietly. Then Simone reached up and adjusted his collar with the unhurried intimacy of someone who had done it many times before. The man got into the SUV and reversed out of the driveway. As the headlights swept across the front of the house, the license plate was briefly, perfectly illuminated. Marcus paused the footage. He enhanced the image. He ran the plate through a lookup service. The vehicle was registered to Dominic Hargrove, residence listed as a gated community in North Raleigh. Marcus sat back. He did not speak. There was nothing to say inside an empty hotel room at 2 in the morning. He saved the footage to 4 separate backup drives and uploaded a copy to an encrypted cloud server. Then he opened the older recordings and began to go back further, searching with fresh eyes, looking at his own home as a crime scene, because that is what it had been for months, a crime scene while he was away working. The attorney's name was Victoria Okafor. She operated out of a glass-fronted office on South Tryon Street in Uptown Charlotte, 12 floors above the street, with a view of the city that communicated exactly the kind of confidence a person in serious trouble needs to see before they even sit down. She was 49 years old, Nigerian-American, and carried herself with the particular authority of someone who had dismantled more dishonest people than she could be bothered to count. Marcus had been referred to her by his college friend, Darius Singleton, who had watched Victoria reduce a fraudulent asset concealment case to rubble 3 years earlier during his sister's divorce proceedings. She is not inexpensive, Darius had said on the phone the night Marcus called him, but she is the kind of attorney that makes the other side's lawyer lose sleep. Tell her I sent you. Victoria reviewed every document Marcus placed on her desk. She did not rush. She moved through the Raleigh travel records, the phone logs, the security footage, and the timeline spreadsheet Marcus had built with the focused attention of someone assembling a mechanism that was going to do significant damage once it was released. She set the last page down and looked at him directly. "This is airtight," she said. "Not strong, airtight. Any one of these elements creates reasonable doubt about the accusation. Together, they constitute proof of a coordinated false claim. The question before us is how far this conspiracy extends and how many people we are going to hold accountable for it." She had already been in contact, she told him, with a private investigator she trusted completely. His name was Raymond Sessoms, former Raleigh Police Department detective, 22 years on the force, the last 9 of them working financial crimes and domestic fraud before he retired into private practice. He was 61 years old, unhurried in the way of someone who had learned that patience was more effective than urgency, and he agreed to meet Marcus the following morning at a coffee shop in the Noda neighborhood of Charlotte. Raymond arrived in a plain jacket and ordered black coffee and asked Marcus exactly 3 questions before he had heard everything he needed. He confirmed the hotel near Prestige South's Durham offices. He noted the 3 out-of-town trips Simone had taken over the summer that Marcus now suspected were not work-related. He wrote down the name Dominic Hargrove and underlined it twice. "Give me 10 days, Raymond said. He needed 7. The medical records arrived on a Tuesday morning. Victoria called Marcus at 7:50 in the morning and told him to come to her office immediately. When he arrived, a medical consultant named Dr. Adaeze Nwosu was already seated at the conference table with a tablet and a printed clinical report. Dr. Nwosu explained without preamble. Based on Janelle's own submitted medical records, confirmed by 2 separate ultrasounds performed at 8 weeks and 12 weeks respectively, the estimated conception date was July 26th, not September. The accusation Janelle had made against Marcus was not only false, it was medically impossible on its own terms, independent of his Raleigh alibi, independent of every other piece of evidence on the table. Janelle had been pregnant before she ever pointed at Marcus Webb in that restaurant. She had known the entire time exactly who the father was. She had walked into that dinner carrying a lie she had been constructing since July. Raymond slid a photograph across the table, a recovered and deleted Instagram post, a sunset from a beachfront hotel balcony in Wilmington, North Carolina, Janelle in the foreground, and in the reflection of the sliding glass door behind her, just visible from the shoulders up, was Dominic Hargrove. She forgot about reflections, Raymond said simply. Victoria filed the counter-motion in Mecklenburg County Superior Court at 9:30 in the morning on a Thursday. The document was comprehensive, methodical, and devastating. It moved to dismiss Simone's divorce petition on grounds of fraud, malicious prosecution, and abuse of legal process. It filed counterclaims for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and conspiracy to commit civil fraud. It attached every piece of evidence as a numbered exhibit. It demanded that Dominic Hargrove be subpoenaed, deposed under oath, and compelled to submit to court-ordered paternity testing. By 11 in the morning, Marcus's phone had begun receiving calls from numbers he did not recognize. By noon, a legal news blog that covered Mecklenburg County court filings had published a summary of the case. By 2 in the afternoon, a Charlotte television station was running the story with a chyron that read, "Local man claims elaborate paternity conspiracy in contentious divorce filing." At 2:47 in the afternoon, Marcus received a call from an unrecognized number with a Durham area code. He answered on speaker. Victoria and Raymond were both in the room. Marcus. The voice was tight, controlled, and unmistakably frightened beneath the surface. "This is Dominic Hargrove." Silence. "I know about the filing," Dominic continued. "I know what you have. I am calling to ask you, man to man, to give me the opportunity to make this right before it goes any further. My wife, my children, they are completely innocent in all of this. Whatever I did, whatever mistakes I made, they do not deserve what is about to happen to them if this continues." Marcus said nothing for a long moment. Then, quietly, "You used my home as a meeting place. You sat at my table, you shook my hand, and then you helped plan my destruction inside the house I worked overtime to pay for. Whatever's about to happen to you, Dominic, you chose every step that leads to it." The line was silent. "See you in court," Marcus said, and ended the call. That evening, Janelle called. Her voice was raw and fractured in the way of someone who'd been crying for hours. She asked to meet. She said there was context he did not have. She said things were more complicated than they appeared. "You are not sorry for what you did," Marcus said. "You are sorry it did not work. There is a significant difference between those two things." He ended the call. 11 minutes later, Janelle left a voicemail. Her voice was high and unraveling. She said she had panicked. She said she had made a terrible mistake. She said she would tell everyone she was wrong. She said she would do whatever he needed. She begged him not to let it reach a courtroom. Victoria saved the voicemail and marked it as Exhibit 31. "She just confessed on a recorded line," Victoria said with the quiet satisfaction of an attorney who has watched a case finish building itself. "That voicemail alone carries criminal exposure." The settlement negotiations began on a Monday and concluded by Wednesday. It did not take long. When people understand that the ground beneath them has already collapsed, they stop pretending to negotiate from a position of strength. Dominic Hargrove's attorney opened with an offer of $250,000. Marcus did not respond to the number. He gave Victoria a list of terms instead, and Victoria delivered them without modification. Marcus wanted full ownership of the Cotswold home and all joint marital assets, with Simone retaining only her personal belongings, her vehicle, and her individual retirement account. He wanted Janelle to record a formal video apology in Victoria's conference room, in front of 2 witnesses and a notary public, stating clearly, specifically, and without vague language, that she had falsely accused Marcus Webb of fathering her child, that every detail of the accusation was a fabrication, and that Marcus bore no responsibility for any part of what had occurred. He wanted Dominic to pay $400,000. $150,000 to Marcus directly for damages and emotional distress, $150,000 to a Charlotte-based organization supporting individuals who had been falsely accused, $100,000 to cover all legal fees, with any remainder returned to Marcus. And he wanted criminal charges held in permanent reserve, not pursued immediately, but preserved indefinitely. If any of the 3 parties ever violated the settlement terms, spoke about him publicly in a defamatory manner, or attempted any further action against him, he would file with the Mecklenburg County District Attorney the following morning. They would carry that weight every day for the rest of their lives. They accepted every term. The video apology was recorded on a Thursday afternoon. Janelle sat in a chair in Victoria's conference room in front of a camera, flanked by a notary and a witness, and spent 5 minutes and 40 seconds admitting to everything. Her hands trembled through the entire recording. Her voice broke twice. Whether from genuine remorse or the proximity of a criminal charge she had barely avoided, Marcus could not tell. He watched the recording once and did not watch it again. The house transfer was completed on Friday morning at a title company in Southend. Simone arrived wearing sunglasses. Her hands shook as she signed. When the last document was finished, she hesitated at the door. She removed her sunglasses. Her eyes were hollow in the particular way of someone who has burned down something irreplaceable and is only now beginning to understand what the smoke means. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "I know that does not repair anything, but I am sorry." Marcus looked at her. He did not look away. He did not rush the moment. "I do not forgive you," he said, "and I do not hate you. I feel nothing when I look at you, and I think that is the truest consequence of everything you did. You took something real and turned it into empty space where something used to live." She nodded. She left. The door closed behind her. The room was quiet. 3 months later, on a Saturday morning in early spring, Marcus Webb stood in the kitchen of his home in Charlotte, North Carolina, and made coffee. The house was quiet in the way that belongs entirely to one person. No other schedule on the refrigerator, no other habits occupying the counters. Just light coming through the window above the sink, falling across the hardwood floor in long, clean rectangles, the way light moves through a space that has been reclaimed. His phone rested on the counter. A text from Darius. "First week back at work. We are celebrating tonight. Do not argue with me." Marcus smiled. A real smile. The kind that does not need to explain itself. Gerald Osei had called 3 weeks after the settlement. He had apologized at length, professionally and personally, for placing Marcus on leave without adequately investigating the accusation first. He had offered Marcus his position back with a promotion to lead infrastructure architect and a salary increase to $112,000. He had included a written acknowledgement that the company had failed to support him when it mattered. Marcus had accepted, not because he needed the validation of returning, but because he had built something real in that role, and he was not going to let someone else's dishonesty drive him out of work he was genuinely excellent at. A second text arrived. Raymond Sessoms. "Thought you should know. Dominic Hargrove's wife filed for divorce in Wake County yesterday. She is pursuing full asset division, primary custody, and a motion to freeze his accounts pending settlement. Also, Janelle gave birth last week. A boy. Healthy. Dominic's attorneys are already negotiating child support terms. Initial estimate is $6,800 per month for 18 years. Marcus set the phone down. He carried his coffee out to the back patio. The morning was genuinely beautiful. The sky above Charlotte was the particular shade of blue that only appears in early spring, when the air still carries the last cold edge of winter, but the light has already shifted. Birds were moving through the trees at the back of the yard. The neighborhood was waking up slowly, the sounds of it soft and ordinary and entirely indifferent to individual catastrophe. Dominic would spend the next 18 years watching his wealth leave his accounts every month. Janelle would raise a child alone, her reputation permanently altered, her relationship with Simone's family fractured in ways that would not heal. Simone had quietly been removed from her position at Prestige South. No formal announcement, no explanation required. The industry had drawn its own conclusions. None of it had required Marcus to destroy anyone. He had simply told the truth with enough documentation to make the truth impossible to ignore. Everything else had been natural consequence, the particular gravity that lies generate when they finally stop being believed. He had lost his marriage. He had lost a version of himself that still believed the people closest to him were who they appeared to be. He had lost 8 years of a story he thought he was building with someone who turned out to be performing a different story entirely. But he had kept his integrity. He had kept his house. He had kept his career. And he had gained something that cannot be manufactured or borrowed or given to a person by anyone else. The absolute, unshakable knowledge of his own worth. The particular strength that only grows in a person who has survived being buried alive and discovered in the dark that they were still breathing. He sat in the morning sun for a long time, not thinking about any of them, just sitting, just breathing, just being present inside a life that was, at last, entirely and completely and irrevocably his own. Sometimes the truth does not arrive gently. Sometimes it arrives like a collapse, like a floor giving way, like 23 faces turning toward you in a candlelit restaurant while someone you trusted points and lies. But the truth arrives. It always arrives. And when it does not need embellishment. It does not need revenge. It only needs one person willing to stay calm enough, long enough, to let it finish speaking. Marcus Webb finished his coffee. He went inside. He had floors to refinish. He had a life to build. And for the first time in months, he was not tired at all. If you enjoyed this story, like this video and leave a comment telling me what you thought. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell to get alerts for new stories like this one. Thanks for watching.